It felt like a punch to the gut. Standing in my son's kitchen, the place I'd spent so many hours cooking meals and watching them grow, Amanda's words hit me harder than any insult. "The best gift you could give us," she said with that fake smile plastered across her face, "is if you disappeared. Just disappear from our lives." I froze. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I wondered if the world had just stopped. But no, it hadn't. Michael, my own flesh and blood, stood there beside her. He didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. His nod was all the confirmation I needed. He agreed. I fought back the sting of tears threatening to rise. No, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. They'd pushed me to the edge. But this crossed a line. I was more than just a source of money. My mind raced, but I knew I had to play it cool. Keep calm. Stay in control. Where exactly am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice eerily steady, almost too steady. Amanda shrugged. It cool. Keep calm. Stay in control. Pretending to be more interested in her perfectly manicured nails than in me. I don't know. A hotel? Your sister's, maybe? Honestly, Dorothy, I don't care where you go, as long as you're gone tomorrow. I could feel my heart pounding, but I didn't flinch. This is my son's house, too, I reminded her, but my words barely registered. Actually, Michael interrupted, his voice flat and cold, it's more Amanda's house now. She's handled all the finances, the renovations, you just gave us some money. Once. The room spun, but I stayed rooted to the spot, staring at the granite countertops I'd chosen, the cabinets I'd helped design with my own money. My money. And now they were acting like I didn't matter. Like I never had. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I didn't. Instead, something shifted deep inside me. Not a break, no. It was like a switch had flipped, a part of me I'd buried for so long suddenly coming alive. You're right, I said softly, my words so calm they didn't even sound like my own. I should go. Amanda blinked, clearly expecting more. Probably tears, maybe begging, but she wouldn't get that from me. Not today. I'll pack my things, I said. And I'll be gone within the hour. Michael looked, relieved. Probably for the best, Mom, he muttered, his words cutting through me like a knife. We can talk after the honeymoon, once things settle down. Talk? After the honeymoon? They had no idea what was coming. I wasn't leaving quietly. No, I was done being the invisible, selfless mother. I was done. I had always done what I thought was best for them. For Michael and Amanda, I gave up everything, my time, my energy, and most painfully, my money. 3 years ago, I sold the house Robert and I had spent years rebuilding, our dream home, to give them the down payment for the house they wanted. The one they said would be their forever home. It wasn't a small sum. $87,000, my entire life savings, everything I had left after Robert's death, went into that house. I thought I was giving them a foundation to build a future. I believed, like any mother, that I was doing the right thing. The right thing for my son, for my family. They promised me, both of them, that I would always have a place there. That I would always be part of their lives. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the promise. The promise that no matter what, I wouldn't be left behind. That they would care for me, just as I had cared for them. And now, here I was, standing in their kitchen, the very space I had helped to make beautiful, and hearing Amanda say I was no longer welcome. Michael, my son, stood there, his face an unreadable mask, offering nothing but silence and a nod of agreement. I thought back to that day, years ago, when I handed over that check. The day I signed the papers and let go of everything I had. I thought I was investing in their future. But I was wrong. What did they really want from me? They took everything I gave them, financial support, emotional support, years of hard work, and turned it into something disposable. To them, it was just money. A transaction. A line on a balance sheet. No gratitude. No acknowledgement of the sacrifices I'd made. Just the belief that everything I gave them was theirs by right, as if I had no claim to it at all. And Amanda. Oh, Amanda. She'd always been good at playing the part, pretending to be sweet and appreciative. But now, she was like a stranger. Someone I didn't even recognize. I had seen her grow from a sweet young woman into someone entitled and selfish, but this was something I could never have predicted. Her coldness, her complete lack of respect, it shattered something inside me. As I stood there in their kitchen, surrounded by the very things I had made possible, I felt something cold and hard snap into place inside me. It wasn't anger, though there was plenty of that. No, it was something deeper. Something darker. A shift, like gears clicking into a different position. I had given everything, and now, I was being dismissed. I would not be their doormat any longer. The final straw came the day before the wedding, the day that was supposed to be all about celebrating Amanda and Michael's future. Instead, it was about me being shoved out of the picture entirely. I had spent weeks helping with the arrangements, organizing everything down to the smallest detail. The flowers, the catering, the seating plan. You name it, I was there, doing everything I could to make their big day perfect. And for what? So Amanda could dismiss me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience? Her voice rang in my ears, her words as cold and biting as ever. We don't need your negativity around here, Dorothy. This is supposed to be a special weekend, and you're ruining everything. Ruining everything? I had spent the entire afternoon making sure everything was in place. I had spent hours listening to Amanda complain about every tiny detail, from the caterer's choice of cheese to the weather forecast. The only negativity I'd shown was suggesting, in the gentlest way possible, that maybe, just maybe, we didn't need ice sculptures shaped like swans. Was that so wrong? I stood there, my heart pounding, my mind racing, but I didn't flinch. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I took a breath, my voice calm and unnervingly steady, and asked the question I knew they wouldn't have an answer to. Where exactly am I supposed to go? Amanda shrugged, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light. I don't know. A hotel? Your sister's? Honestly, Dorothy, I don't care where you go. Just make sure you're not here tomorrow. Her words landed like a slap. No, worse than a slap. It felt like a full body punch that left me gasping for air. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't needed. I had been reduced to a mere inconvenience in their perfect little world. This is my son's house, too, I reminded her, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. Actually, Michael interrupted, his tone flat and detached, it's more Amanda's house now. She's been handling everything, the money, the improvements. You just gave us some money once. That's it, some money once. $87,000. My life savings. All of it, gone in one sentence. I stood there, staring at the kitchen, the very heart of their home, and felt a wave of cold wash over me. The granite countertops I had helped choose. The custom cabinets I'd made possible. The house they had called their dream home. It was all mine, and they had the audacity to act like I was some charity case. Something inside me shifted, not broke, shifted. It was like a piece of me that had been frozen in time finally came to life, and the person standing in front of them wasn't the woman they thought I was. You're right, I said softly, my voice now dangerously calm. I should go. Amanda blinked in surprise, probably expecting me to cry, to beg, to do something dramatic that she could later gossip about with her friends. But there would be no drama from me. Not today, not ever again. I'll pack my things, I said, my words slow and deliberate. And I'll be gone within the hour. Michael, for the first time in this entire nightmare, looked relieved. Probably for the best, Mom, he muttered, a thin thread of indifference in his voice. We can talk after the honeymoon, once things settle down. Talk? After the honeymoon? As if this was some silly little argument about seating arrangements. As if I wasn't standing on the edge of a moment that would change everything. I turned and walked upstairs, my heart still racing, but my mind clear. I wasn't just going to leave. No, I had been dismissed, cast aside, and treated like I didn't matter for far too long. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning. I spent the next hour in the guest room, my guest room, not a place I was allowed to call home anymore, packing my things, folding clothes into my suitcase with steady hands. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying the conversation, the words that cut deeper than I ever expected. And then, as I stood there by the window, looking out at their picture-perfect life, something started to crystallize in my mind. This wasn't just about being kicked out. It was about my future. I'd given them everything. And now, they had the nerve to tell me I was just a nuisance. I wasn't some old woman who had to be grateful for the scraps she was given. I'd spent my life working hard, loving my family, and I had earned every penny I had. Every penny that was now tied up in that house. I pulled my phone from my bag, my fingers steady as I dialed the emergency number of the one person who'd always had my back, Margaret Chen, my lawyer. Margaret had been there for me since Robert's death, managing my affairs, offering sage advice when I needed it most. Margaret, it's me. I need you to pull up everything related to the house. All of it. The mortgage, the deed, the paperwork, everything. I kept my voice calm, but the urgency was there. Everything all right, Dorothy? Margaret asked, her tone light, but I could hear the concern. No, not even close, I said, biting back the anger. I need to know exactly what I own. You warned me this might happen. Now it has. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her working through her thoughts. What happened, Dorothy? I took a deep breath, recounting the ultimatum Amanda had given me, how Michael had stood there, silent and indifferent, agreeing with his fiancée that I was a burden. I told her everything, the dismissal, the disrespect. And then, I dropped the bombshell. They've made it clear I'm no longer welcome in their life. But what they don't know is that I'm not as disposable as they think. I need to know where I stand legally. Margaret's voice turned serious. You remember those documents we signed after Robert passed? The ones I insisted on after you mentioned concerns about Amanda's spending habits? I froze. My heart started pounding. What are you talking about? Those papers you signed gave you co-ownership of the house. The $87,000 you gave them wasn't a gift, it was a loan. Legally, you're listed as a co-borrower and co-owner of that property, Dorothy. I felt the blood rush from my face. Are you serious? Dead serious, Margaret said, the calmness in her voice a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I had a feeling this day might come, so I made sure everything was documented. Amanda never signed the forms acknowledging the loan. But the mortgage company has you down as a co-borrower. The deed shows you own 35% of that house. I almost dropped the phone. 35%? You're telling me I own part of that house? That's exactly what I'm saying. You're legally entitled to 35% ownership of that property. And if you wanted to sell your share, you could. I leaned against the window, staring at the house. The house where I had been humiliated. The house I had helped make possible. It was my home, too. I was done being the invisible mother, the easy target for their neglect. It was time to take control. Margaret, I said, my voice steady now, a plan already forming. I need you to prepare a notice of intent to sell. First thing Monday morning, I want it delivered. There was a long pause, and then Margaret spoke, her voice low with concern. Dorothy, are you sure about this? Once you start this process, there's no turning back. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. They want me to disappear? Fine, but I'm taking my 35% with me. It's time they learned that actions have consequences. I stood at the hotel window, staring out at the empty streets, my mind whirling. Below me, the world was moving at its usual pace. People were going about their lives, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. But up here, in the quiet of my room, the winds of change were picking up speed. The world they had tried to build, one where I was just a background character, a silent financial supporter, was about to come crashing down. I hadn't just walked away from their lives. No, I had made sure that things would never be the same again. The wedding was in just a few hours, and Amanda and Michael were obliviously preparing for their perfect day, as if everything was fine. But for me, the day had already been written. Their perfect little world was about to unravel. The wedding reception, the $14,000 reception I had financed, was no longer happening. I had already made the call. The country club would be the first to feel the impact. I picked up the phone again, dialing the number of Sunset Gardens Country Club. The voice on the other end was chirpy and polite, the kind of voice you expect to hear when everything is still running smoothly. Sunset Gardens, this is Jessica. How may I help you? I took a deep breath. Hi, Jessica, this is Dorothy Mitchell. I need to speak with your catering manager about today's wedding reception. Oh, Mrs. Mitchell, how exciting. The wedding's today, right? How can I assist you? I felt a small smile play at the corner of my mouth. Actually, there's been a change of plans. I need to cancel the reception. There was a long pause on the other end. Cancel? But, ma'am, it's less than 24 hours away. The food's already prepared, the staff is scheduled, the event is set to go. I understand, I said, my voice calm, almost detached. And I'm prepared to pay the cancellation fees. However, I'm the one who signed the contract, and I put down the deposit. I believe I have the right to make changes. I could hear the rustling of papers as Jessica checked the contract. Yes, the contract is under your name with your credit card information, but, surely, you want to speak with the bride and groom first? I didn't hesitate. No need. I'm making an executive decision. Please cancel everything. There was an awkward silence on the other end before Jessica spoke again, her voice now tinged with confusion. Mrs. Mitchell, with all due respect, this seems like something that should involve the happy couple. don't you think? I glanced at the window, watching the sunlight shift across the city streets. A part of me wanted to feel guilty, but I didn't. The happy couple made it very clear that my involvement in their lives is no longer welcome. So, I'm simply honoring their wishes. There was another pause, followed by a resigned sigh. Understood, Mrs. Mitchell. I'll take care of everything. Is there anything else I can do for you? I held the phone tight, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. No, thank you, Jessica. Just send the final bill to my hotel. I'll settle everything when I check out. I hung up, a quiet sense of satisfaction filling me. The wedding, Amanda's big day, was still happening, but everything else that came with it? Gone. I wasn't the villain here. I was simply protecting myself. The hotel room was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. I sat in the soft armchair by the window, my phone buzzing in my hand. I knew what it was. I knew what was coming. They had no idea how to handle the mess I just handed them. Amanda's first call came at exactly 11:47 p.m. The shrillness of her voice sliced through the calm of the room. What did you do? She screeched. What did you do, Dorothy? I took a slow breath, letting the silence fill the space before I answered. I honored your request. You wanted me to disappear, so I disappeared. Disappear? She hissed. The country club called. They said you cancelled our reception. Our reception, Dorothy? There are 200 people expecting dinner tomorrow. What the hell is wrong with you? I could hear the panic rising in her voice, and it made something inside me settle. This was the reality of their world falling apart. Your reception? I asked, almost casually. You're still getting married. People will still witness that. They just won't get a free dinner afterward. The words felt like a sting, but I didn't flinch. You can't do this. Michael's voice cut through, his tone sharp with anger and disbelief. You can't just cancel our wedding because you're upset about sleeping arrangements. I leaned back in my chair, unbothered. I didn't cancel your wedding. I just canceled the reception I was paying for. You know, the one that was costing me $14,000. Silence. I could almost feel the weight of the realization settle on their shoulders, the heavy burden of guilt and shame they were trying to ignore. It had always been my money. My generosity. And they had treated it like it was nothing. 14,000. Amanda's voice was faint now, barely above a whisper. The reception. The flowers. The photographer. The band. Did you think it was all free? Did you think it just materialized because you two decided to have a fairy tale wedding? I shot back, the frustration rising in my chest. You think I just waved a magic wand and money appeared? Did you think I wouldn't notice when you started spending it all, living a life you couldn't afford? The sound of Amanda sobbing on the other end of the line twisted something in my gut. But I didn't let it sway me. Not anymore. You two have been living on my generosity for too long, and now you're facing the consequences of that. You don't get to throw a tantrum just because your fairy tale fell apart. I can't believe you're doing this, Michael said, his voice laced with desperation. We can't tell 200 people there's no reception. It'll ruin everything. I let out a small sigh, the kind you give when someone asks a question they should already know the answer to. You're resourceful adults. You'll figure it out. McDonald's caters now, I hear. Good luck. As I hung up, the weight of the moment settled in. I had done what I needed to do. I wasn't the villain here, but I wasn't the martyr either. I had given everything, and it had been taken for granted. Now, they had to face the consequences. I turned off my phone, leaning back into the chair and closing my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. I wasn't the one drowning in chaos anymore. By the time the sun rose, I had already made my decision. There was no going back, no remorse for what I'd done. I wasn't going to beg for their approval, not anymore. I had given them everything, and they had taken it all for granted. Now, they had to face the reality I had been shielding them from for too long. It wasn't long before my phone started buzzing with messages, 37 missed calls and 41 texts from Michael and Amanda. But I ignored them all, letting the silence between us stretch further. They were finally starting to see the consequences of their choices, and I wasn't about to rush in and save them. But they didn't stop, and when the knock came at my hotel room door at 9 a.m., I already knew who it was. I opened it to find Michael standing there, his face pale and drawn, his tuxedo shirt wrinkled as if he'd been up all night. Mom, please, he said, his voice tight with urgency. We need to talk. I stepped aside to let him in, but I didn't invite him to sit. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Not this time. Shouldn't you be getting ready for your big day? I asked, my voice quiet, but the edge of it clear. He didn't answer, just ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Amanda's having a meltdown, he said. She's locked herself in the bathroom and won't come out. Her mother's threatening to fly back to California. The whole thing is falling apart. I folded my arms, looking at him without sympathy. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice cool. But what do you want me to do about it? I didn't ruin your wedding. I just stopped paying for it. Michael's face twisted with disbelief. This is insane, Mom. Over what? A misunderstanding about sleeping arrangements? A couple of things didn't go as planned, but we can talk about it. I shook my head, the disappointment in my chest growing. No, Michael, this isn't about seating arrangements. This is about respect. This is about how you and Amanda have treated me for years. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand to stop him. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? When was the last time you treated me like your mother instead of your personal bank account? Michael faltered, closing his mouth. I could see the realization flickering in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the years of taking and never giving back. We've always treated you well, he said weakly. Have you? I challenged. When was the last time you invited me somewhere because you wanted my company, not just my checkbook? When was the last time you thought about my needs instead of just your own? He opened his mouth again, but no words came out. I pressed on. I've given you $37,000 in emergencies and little helps over the past year. And that doesn't even count the $87,000 I gave you for your house down payment. Do you realize how much that is? Do you understand what it means? He sank into a chair, his face drained of color. We always planned to pay you back, he muttered. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Because Amanda's been shopping for a new car, and you've been looking at vacation packages to Europe. Not once have either of you mentioned paying me back. Not even a thank you. Michael's shoulders slumped. He looked defeated, but I wasn't going to let up. I had put up with too much for too long. I'm not your personal ATM, Michael, I said softly, but with iron in my voice. Kindness and generosity are not infinite. I'm not a well you can keep drawing from without ever thinking about the cost. He looked up at me, his eyes now pleading. What do you want from us, Mom? It was the first time he'd asked that question with any sincerity. It took everything in me not to laugh. They had finally come to understand something I'd known all along. I want exactly what you offered me, I said, my voice steady. You told me the best gift I could give you was to disappear from your lives permanently. So, I'm doing that. I'm taking my 35% share of the house with me when I go. I could see the panic rise in his eyes, the tension pulling at his jaw. You can't just take it. It's our house, we bought it. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Not according to the paperwork, Michael. I'm listed as a co-owner. And legally, I can force a sale of that property. There was a long silence as he processed the enormity of what I was saying. Finally, he spoke, his voice small. What happens now? You have two choices, I said, my words crisp and clear. You can buy me out, or we sell the house and split the proceeds. Either way, I'm taking my 35%. His face went pale as he realized the full weight of what was at stake. We don't have the money to buy you out, he said quietly. We can't afford it. That's not my problem anymore, Michael, I replied. The house is worth $300,000 now. 35% of that is over $100,000. That's what I'm entitled to. And if you can't afford to buy me out, then we sell. He sat back in the chair, his hands running through his hair again, the panic setting in. You're really going to make us sell the house? I'm not making you do anything, I said. I'm simply exercising my legal rights as a co-owner. What you do with that information is up to you. The silence between Michael and me stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could see the gears turning in his head as he processed everything I just said. The weight of his realization wasn't lost on me. He had never once considered the true cost of all his actions, the money, the time, the sacrifices I'd made. To him, it had always just been there, like an endless well he could dip into whenever things got tough. Now, for the first time in years, he had to look at me and realize that the well had run dry. You've always bailed us out, Mom, he said finally, his voice quiet. You've always been there. I never thought about it like this before. Of course you didn't, I said, my voice calm, but the sting in my words sharp enough to make him flinch. Because you never had to. You've been taking from me for so long that you didn't even realize it. But that stops now. Michael opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, silencing him. I didn't raise you to be entitled, Michael. I didn't raise you to think that people will always be there to clean up your messes. And I certainly didn't raise you to think that your mother's love comes with an open checkbook. I could see the guilt flash in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to fix what had been broken. I'm not your personal ATM, I repeated, the words more forceful this time. And I'm not going to sit quietly while you and Amanda treat me like a bank with no limits. I spent years giving, and what did I get in return? A half-hearted apology and a "get lost" when you no longer need me. He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. I get it, Mom. I do. I screwed up, but we're still family, aren't we? Doesn't that count for something? I stood too, looking him straight in the eye. Yes, we're family, but family isn't an excuse to mistreat someone. Family doesn't give you the right to take without ever giving back. I spent years helping you too, without asking for anything in return, because I thought that's what a mother does. I thought it was my job to give, to make sure you had everything you needed. But you know what? I was wrong. I taught you to expect it. And I'm sorry for that. There was no anger in my voice anymore, just the quiet conviction that had been building in me for days. I wasn't angry with them anymore. I was done. I watched Michael's face as he processed my words. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time in a long time, I saw him as the grown man he was, not the child who had come to me whenever there was a problem he couldn't solve on his own. We've always treated you well, he said again, but this time it sounded weaker, less sure of itself. Have you? I asked, stepping closer, keeping my tone calm but firm. When was the last time you actually asked me how I was doing? When was the last time you cared about anything other than what I could do for you? There was a pause, and I could see him searching for an answer, but he didn't have one. You haven't treated me like a person in years, Michael. You haven't treated me like a mother. You've treated me like a resource, like someone who exists to solve your problems. And I've let you. I've let you because I wanted to keep the peace. But not anymore. His face reddened, and I knew he wanted to argue, to say something, anything, that would make this right. But I wasn't going to let him. Not this time. I've done enough, Michael, I said softly. I've given enough. And it's time for you to grow up and figure this out without me. I'll no longer be the person you come to when you need to be bailed out. The silence stretched again. It wasn't an angry silence. It wasn't a silence full of regret or sorrow, either. It was just quiet. And for once, it was the kind of quiet that made me feel like I had peace. Are you going to make us sell the house? He asked, his voice tight. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in a long time. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a grown man who had made choices. He wasn't a victim of circumstances. He was a player in this game, and he had to learn to live with the consequences of those choices. Yes, I said quietly. You can't afford it, Michael. And you've never shown me that you can be responsible with money. So, yes, we're selling the house. He nodded slowly, the reality of the situation sinking in. And what happens now? I smiled, a soft smile, the kind that held no malice, but everything I needed to say without words. You figure it out, Michael, I said. You and Amanda. You figure out how to live without relying on me. And maybe, just maybe, you'll finally start treating me like I'm worth something. Worth more than just what I can give you. By the time I'd finished my conversation with Michael, I felt like I'd said everything I needed to say. I had laid out the facts, drawn the line, and made it clear that I wasn't backing down. The power had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. But even in that clarity, a small part of me, one I hadn't really acknowledged before, wondered if things could ever go back to the way they were. Could I ever go back to being the mother I once was to Michael? Could I ever find a way to mend the rift that had torn through my family? I didn't have time to dwell on it. Before I could even finish the thought, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Amanda. I need to talk. Can you please call me when you get a chance? I stared at the message for a long moment. It wasn't what I'd expected, not in the least. She'd been the one who had told me to disappear, the one who had dismissed me so easily. Part of me wanted to ignore the text, to keep the distance between us. But another part, one that was quieter, more curious, wondered what she had to say. I dialed her number, my finger hesitating over the screen for a split second before I pressed the call button. She picked up almost immediately. Mom? Her voice was soft, almost tentative. Not the brash, entitled tone I was used to hearing. I could barely recognize it. Amanda? I said, keeping my voice neutral. What's going on? She paused, taking a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked just slightly. I owe you an apology. A real one. I blinked, stunned. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but this was certainly not it. What do you mean? I've been horrible to you, Mom, she said, her words tumbling out now, each one heavier than the last. I've treated you like you were nothing. Like you didn't matter. Like your only purpose was to serve us. And I'm so sorry. The apology was raw, and it was unlike anything I'd ever heard from her before. Amanda had always been quick to demand, quick to expect, and slow to give. But now, something was different. Something had shifted in her. I didn't mean for things to get this bad, she continued, her voice faltering. I didn't realize how much I took from you, how much I just expected you to give without ever thinking about what it cost you. I thought you'd always be there. But that wasn't fair, it wasn't right, and I've been a terrible daughter. I didn't know what to say at first. I was used to Amanda's manipulation, to her shallow apologies when things didn't go her way. But this was different. This time, there was a kind of sincerity in her voice that I hadn't heard before. Maybe she hadn't realized the full extent of her actions until now. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to see things from my perspective. I don't know what happened to me, she said, almost to herself. I became so focused on the wedding, on making everything perfect, that I lost sight of what really matters. I treated you like you were an inconvenience, and that's not who you are. You've always been there for me, and I've just used you. Her words hung in the air, and I felt something I hadn't expected, a flicker of something close to hope. Maybe this was the turning point I'd been waiting for. Maybe she was finally growing up. I'm sorry, Mom. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you can find it in your heart to give it to me. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I took a long breath, letting her words sink in. I had waited so long for something like this, an apology that felt real. But the truth was, it wasn't enough to just hear the words. Amanda had to prove it, just like Michael. They both had to prove they were capable of change. I hear you, Amanda, I said finally, my voice steady. And I appreciate you saying that. But saying the words is only part of the equation. You've got to show me that you mean it. You've got to prove you've changed. There was silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her processing my words, trying to figure out how to move forward. I know, she whispered. I know, and I will. I'll prove it to you. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't know if she was capable of change. I didn't know if this was a temporary shift in her, a moment of self-awareness that would fade once the wedding was over. But I had to give her the chance. I had to believe that people could change, or else what was the point of this entire ordeal? Okay, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'll believe you, but only if you show me you can be better. We're not going back to the way things were, Amanda. Things have changed, and they're going to stay that way. You've got a long way to go to make this right. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. I understand, Mom, and I'm ready to do the work. I'm sorry. I really am. I ended the call quietly, my thoughts swirling. This wasn't the fairy tale ending I'd imagined. But it was a beginning. A small, fragile step toward something better. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally starting to understand the cost of their actions. It had been a few days since my conversation with Amanda. She seemed different, more reflective, less entitled, but I wasn't fooling myself into thinking things had magically changed overnight. People don't change that quickly. The wounds of the past couldn't be healed with a few well-meaning words and a half-hearted apology. No, change takes work. Real work. I knew that better than anyone. I had already made up my mind about what needed to happen next. It wasn't enough for Michael and Amanda to just say they were sorry. They needed to prove it, not with promises, but with action. When they called to set up a meeting, I didn't hesitate. I told them to meet me at Margaret's office, the same place where we'd hashed out the legal details of the house. This time, though, I knew it wouldn't be about just the house. It would be about everything. About accountability, about respect, about rebuilding a broken relationship. I arrived early, sitting in the quiet, dimly lit waiting room, flipping through the legal papers on the table in front of me. The clock ticked away in the background, but I didn't feel the usual impatience that came with waiting. I was ready for whatever came next. When Michael and Amanda finally walked in, they were both wearing the same strained expressions they'd had for the past few days, tired, frustrated, and worn out. But there was something else in their eyes, something different. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the realization that things had reached a breaking point. They sat down across from me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to hide behind the mask of the always loving, always giving mother. I was done with that role. Before we get started, I said, looking at both of them, I need you to understand something. I'm not here to negotiate for your convenience. I'm not here to make things easy. This isn't just about the house. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about what you owe me, not just in money, but in decency and gratitude. Amanda and Michael exchanged a look, and I saw the shift in their expressions. This wasn't going to be another one of their usual arguments, another round of excuses. This was different. I know you both think you've been through a lot, I continued, and I know you've always relied on me to bail you out. But that stops now. I've been giving, and you've been taking without ever considering the cost to me. That's over. From now on, I'm setting the terms. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but I could tell he was listening now. Really listening. You've both gotten used to living beyond your means, I said, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. You've gotten used to relying on my generosity, on my ability to fix things. But now, you're going to learn how to do it yourselves. No more bailouts. No more handouts. No more pretending everything's fine while you both live in a fantasy world of, things will always work out. Amanda opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Not yet, Amanda. You're going to listen, too. Because this is just as much about you as it is about Michael. I turned to Michael, who had been quiet so far, but his eyes were wide, taking in everything I said. Here's what's going to happen. First, Amanda is going to get a job. A real job. She's not going to sit around waiting for someone else to fix things for her. I've given you both more than enough. You're going to start contributing to this household, financially and emotionally. Amanda's face flushed, and I could see the resistance building in her, but I wasn't backing down. And Michael, you're going to take a hard look at your finances. You're going to stop pretending that things are fine. I want to see a budget. A real one. No more living paycheck to paycheck, and no more hiding behind the excuse of, we're doing the best we can. I could see the panic rising in both of them now. The reality of what I was asking them to do was sinking in. But I wasn't about to let them off easy. Not anymore. If you two want to buy me out of my share of the house, I said, my voice firm, you'll have to prove that you can manage your finances. I'm not just going to hand over my share of the property without knowing that you'll be responsible with it. I want a complete household budget, a clear plan for paying off all your debts, and a realistic strategy for how you're going to afford the mortgage without relying on me. There was a long silence as they processed what I had just laid out. It wasn't easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But it was necessary. If you can't meet those terms, I said, my voice hardening slightly, then we'll sell the house, and the proceeds will be split according to ownership percentages. It's your choice. But the window for a decision is closing fast. You've got 30 days. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms and watching them closely. I wasn't doing this for my own satisfaction. I was doing it because they needed to learn the lesson of self-sufficiency, and they needed to understand that I was no longer going to be their fallback. This isn't about punishment. This is about responsibility, I said. If you can't prove you're ready to stand on your own 2 feet, then the house goes on the market. And that's the end of it. Michael and Amanda sat in stunned silence, each of them digesting what I had said. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice tight with frustration, but also something else. And if we agree to your terms? What then? If you can meet the terms, I said calmly, then we'll talk. We'll work out the details. But don't expect me to make this easy. You've already had enough time for that. They both nodded, their faces pale but determined. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had made the right decision. Not just for me, but for them. They weren't children anymore, and it was time they realized that. Bank, the fixer, the enabler. It hadn't been easy. There had been times when I second-guessed myself, when I wondered if I had gone too far. But when I looked back on it now, I knew it had been the right call. Not just for me, but for them. The house had been sold, just like I'd said it would be. Michael and Amanda had scrambled to come up with the funds to buy me out, but in the end, they'd had to accept the reality that they couldn't afford it. The sale had forced them to face their financial mistakes. They'd moved into a much smaller house in a neighborhood that wasn't nearly as perfect as the one they had lost, but it was theirs, earned, not given. The road hadn't been easy for them. Amanda had gotten a job, like I had insisted, and she'd taken her work seriously, a shift I hadn't expected to see so quickly. Michael had finally sat down and worked out a budget, albeit with a lot of resistance, but he had done it. Slowly, they had started to understand what it meant to be responsible, to stand on their own. They were learning, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't carrying them. They were carrying themselves. As for me, I had found peace. I'd moved into a beautiful new apartment in a quiet senior community, one with walking trails and a pool, the kind of place I had always dreamed of but never thought I would have the chance to live in. It was mine, my space, my life, my time. I spent my mornings reading, my afternoons volunteering, and my evenings cooking for myself, something I had almost forgotten how to do in the years of being needed by everyone else. I'd joined a hiking group, signed up for a book club, and even started flirting with the idea of dating again. Frank, a man I'd met during one of the book club meetings, had asked me out after we'd both laughed at the same joke. It was small, but it felt like a big step. I wasn't rushing anything. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need to be needed. I was learning what it felt like to simply be. To exist for me, not for anyone else. One afternoon, as I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of coffee, my phone buzzed. It was Amanda. I got the promotion. I smiled to myself as I read the text. It had been a long road for her, but this was proof that she was changing. She was proud of herself, and for the first time, I felt proud of her, too. I typed back quickly, "That's wonderful, honey. How do you feel?" "Exhausted," she replied, but there was laughter in her words. "But proud too. I never knew I was good at organizing things." I chuckled softly. "You always were. You just never had to use those skills before." There was a pause before her next message came through. "Dorothy, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the panicked one from Margaret's office." My heart did a strange flip in my chest. I had heard the apology before, but this time, it felt different. It felt like she really meant it. I set my phone down for a moment, thinking back on everything that had happened. The chaos, the anger, the frustration, the pain, but also the clarity, the freedom, the strength that had come with setting boundaries. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that house all those months ago. I had learned to let go, to stand firm, to protect myself. When I picked up my phone again, I typed, "I'm listening." She responded almost immediately. "I was horrible to you for years. I treated you like an ATM, and then I got angry when you had feelings about it. I told myself you were just being dramatic, but the truth is, I was entitled and cruel." I set down my coffee cup, surprised by how much her words affected me. "What changed your mind?" Her next message was simple but meaningful. "Having to work for money instead of just asking for it. Realizing how hard it is to save even $100 when you're paying your own bills. Understanding what you sacrificed to help us. And Michael, he's getting there. He still thinks you were too harsh, but he admits we needed to change." I read her message slowly, letting the weight of it settle in. The old Dorothy might have rushed to restore the relationship, desperate for validation, but the new Dorothy, this version of me, had learned that it wasn't about pleasing anyone else. It was about my own peace. I typed back, "I'm glad, Amanda. And I'm proud of you. But let's take it slow. How about lunch in a public place next time? Baby steps." She responded quickly, "Of course, whatever you're comfortable with." Later that afternoon, as I sat in my new apartment, my phone buzzed again. It was Barbara Worth, Amanda's mother. She had been a source of quiet support in the background, but this time, her message was different. "Heard about Amanda's promotion. Thank you for not giving up on her." I smiled softly, replying, "Thank you for not bailing her out." Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love means saying no. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was Frank, asking if I wanted to go for a walk later that week. He'd made me laugh, and for once, I didn't feel the need to overthink it. I wasn't rushing into anything, but the invitation was a reminder that my life was mine to shape now. I was no longer defined by what I had given to others. I was defined by who I was becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out who that would be.